Heyo, I'm Christie Rocha, podcast host and content creator, and I am thrilled to welcome you to the Inner Edit. This podcast is all about us, the creators, the storytellers, visionaries, navigating the ever-changing online world. We are in this together, facing challenges unique to our craft, like burnout, setting boundaries, dealing with negativity, and that oh-so-familiar imposter syndrome. Join me as I chat with fellow creators, therapists, and coaches to explore collaborations, making connections, diving into creating conscious content, figuring out how to maximize our content output, and discovering that mindset magic that keeps us going. Whether you're a content creator seeking resources or just curious about the behind-the-scenes world of digital creators, the Inner Edit is your resource for personal and professional growth in the digital world. We're all going through the same things, so let's talk about it. Hit that subscribe button and welcome to the Inner Edit. Hello. Welcome back to the Inner Edit. Today I have Renee Reina back on the show. You may remember her from episode 14, goodness, where we discussed self-reflection and authenticity and motherhood and beyond. It was an excellent show and conversation, and it'll be linked in the show notes if you haven't listened to it yet. You probably also know Renee from the internet, where she is the mom friend you always wanted. In March of 2020, just days before the COVID lockdowns, Renee finished her PhD in psychology. Like many of us, she went online and quickly grew an audience of like-minded moms. Since then, she has gained a huge following on both TikTok and Instagram and launched the Mom Room podcast, where she hopes to change how people see themselves in motherhood in her own hilarious way. Today, Renee and I are digging into what content creation means to her, whether or not being true to a niche is important, the crazy amount of work that actually goes into these mediums, how she handles negative comments, and why it's important to actually enjoy the content you're creating. Because, spoiler alert, it is super important. While Renee is not a clinician, her PhD, training, and research all impact her content, and so this does become a little bit of an intersesh. For me, at least it gets that way in the end. So keep listening. It's a good one. We cover a lot. Here's Renee. Hey, Renee. So good to see you. Thanks for being here.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
I have all these questions for you, but any time in the last hour that I've kind of gone over in my head how I want to start this, I keep coming back to the same thing. I look at your accounts, I look at your stuff, I've had my notes here, 371,000 on TikTok, 95,000 on Instagram for the podcast, 164 for your more personal account with your name.
Oops.
Like, that's a lot. Like, how I just am in constant awe of how you're able to not only manage all three, but continue to grow all three. Does it feel as like heavy and like as a task for you as it like seems to me right now? Like, how do you manage all of the three of these like pretty big accounts?
It's funny because I feel myself like I'm not managing them.
Yeah,
Do you know what I mean? Like
I
I am constantly like, I can be doing more. I'm not doing what other people are doing, because I have this tendency to look at other creators who are niche in a certain area. So let's say I love the dumb dads and like the skits that they do.
do. Hmm.
And so I look at their account, which like that's all they do are the skits. But in my mind, I'm like, I need to be doing that. And then I'll see someone else who is like a professional podcaster. And I'm like, I need to be doing everything that they're doing, like putting out professional podcast clips and doing the most in podcasting. And then I see someone else who has like pretty photos with like the long, meaningful captions. And I'm like, I need to do that.
Mm.
So I just kind of fly by the seat of my pants. My goal for this fall when school starts back up is to be more organized and feel like I'm actually managing the accounts properly. Because I don't know if it's part of like my ADHD, but I have so many ideas and I want to do so many things that I end up not doing much because I'm so overwhelmed with my ideas. So it's always like, what do I focus on? So, I mean, I put up content when I think about it. I feel like I should be putting up way more. Like I used to be posting 3 or 4 times a day on TikTok, and now it's like I'll go a few days without posting anything. But my life is so different now from what it was in quarantine.
Right.
So I don't have the ability to do it anymore. So, I mean, am I managing them? I don't know, but they're there.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's funny you say that, because something that I had jotted down a little lower, but in the conversation, I guess, so to speak, what it applies here is that I feel like, as a consumer of your content, that you have blended in a very natural way your niche content as a mom, someone who talks about motherhood all the time, with what naturally interests you. And I was going to ask you, like, is there a thought process behind that? How and why do you do that? And I guess what I was really sort of thinking about it is the way that you do that makes it feel very much like we are seeing you on your platforms and not a brand.
Mm.
And yet it is very much your brand and your business. So, like, it's like this interesting way that you've blended the two. And now it seems like maybe this is just like a natural consequence of like how your brain works. But is
No.
anything more to say on that? Or like, is that intentional? Like, you want to keep that up?
It's so funny that you say that because I have gone back and forth so many times thinking, okay, I need to only do mom stuff because everybody's always, in this industry, it's like, what's your niche? You have to have a niche. You need to
Right.
like niche down. Like the more niche you are, the better. And I have always struggled with that. Of
Mhm.
course, it was easy for me to be niche in mom content when I was at home in quarantine with my child.
Right.
I literally had nothing else going on in my life.
Right.
So that was easy. But now that the world is kind of back to normal and I'm traveling and we're doing new things and Milo's in school, and it's like now I feel like I want to share the most random things that I'm interested in, and I have a really hard time being niche.
Mm.
So my goal for the fall, and this is why I want to start a whole new podcast, which I don't know how that's going to happen, but I'm going to do it. Like, I want the Mom Room podcast to be super niche, and
Mm.
that is where people go for mom stuff, talking to professionals. I really want to niche down on all the topics that have done really well for that podcast and in my content. And then the new podcast will have nothing to do with parenting or being a mom. It's going to be just more, like you said, things that I'm interested in, like the day-to-day kind of stuff,
Mhm.
because I can't niche down. I have a really hard time with that. And I had to, because in the back of my mind, I was like, if you just niche down, because I know what does well. Like I
Mhm.
know what performs
Mhm.
on social media when it comes to mom content. But that doesn't feel good to me as a creator to only do that. Like that doesn't fulfill me. So I had to decide recently, like, don't worry about being niche and just post what you want to post. Like if we go get a freaking, fish tank and
Right.
I want to share about that because it's hilarious and it's funny, then I'm going to do that. If I want to share about Harry Styles, like the Jonas Brothers, like I can't only focus on one topic. So that's how I'm going to try and navigate it moving forward, is like start a new podcast, continue to share content that I think is fun to make, and then the Mom Room podcast account and the actual podcast will be very niche.
Mhm. It makes sense. But I will say, it in how you've been doing it, it comes across very much like you have a very specific audience that you're talking to. Like, your followers are going to see the fish tank and be like, "Oh, that's so Renee." Like,
Yeah.
it doesn't feel non-niche. Like, it just feels like
Renee and the mom room and all the people following along are in this little club, in this group. And we all know that Renee's going to do something off the wall today and like going to post about it. Like, you're very active in your stories. Like, it feels very organic. It doesn't, I totally hear what you're saying about like the industry and like, let's focus. And I could see how separating the podcast off could be, acceleratingly like beneficial, but so far, at least it has not come across like, what is this girl talking about? Like, it all feels very community driven. Feels like you know who you're talking to and you know what's going to hit with your crew.
Yeah. And I'm happy that early on I made a separate account for the podcast.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that.
Because lots of people don't do that. But I was like, I want it to be its own entity versus my account, like the Renee Reina, because, I'm not necessarily going to post. Well, I still do, but like Jonas Brothers stuff or, like random things like on the podcast account. So yeah.
Yeah.
I'm happy that I separated them out.
I was going to ask you about that because I've seen some people do that and some not. And so far I haven't, only because I can't fathom managing both. I also have not really found my personal voice, I think, on social media yet. So all of my social media is my podcast.
Yeah.
And I mentioned like off air, I was like, oh, I don't know if I'll do some video clips because they don't do well. And I know why they don't do well, because for at least right now, the people that listen to my podcast are not going to my Instagram to see what's happening. And so it's like this, it's very like push and pull of like, should I make a separate account? Should I just try to like dive in on one? And like, I don't know, like that. I know I have to put more of my face on my social and have it be a little more like what's going on with me and not just like episode 175. Like, no one cares about that. Like, no one is looking for that on Instagram. If you listen to podcasts, you're on the podcast app,
Yeah. And I feel like no matter where you are in your like podcast or your social media career, like those are decisions that you have to make. Like, I felt the exact same way. I was like, the podcast clips don't, they don't get as many like views, especially on TikTok and YouTube too. Like my YouTube channel is like nothing. Yeah. But I will consistently put up clips, put up the episodes because I just feel like I should. Yeah. But you have to make a decision. I was like, do I want to put resources and time and effort into this, even though it's not generating anything? Yeah. And it's the same with the Instagram clips and the TikTok podcast clips. Like, I know down the road, like I value that as a consumer of podcasts or like someone that listens to podcasts. So I want to put that out there. So I will, I hired someone now to create the clips for me, which is not cheap, but I'm like, I value that. And it's hard because it's like, is it worth it at the end of the day? And sometimes it's not just about that. It's like, how do you want your business, your podcast to look online? If someone's a new listener and then they pop into the Instagram account, they're going to be like, oh, cool. Like there's, fun clips and, it just adds to it. So like it might feel like it's not doing anything and it's not worth it, but yeah, those are hard decisions to make.
Do you tend to make decisions like that and beyond on your own, or do you have people now that you trust to kind of bounce all these ideas off of?
Some things are just on my own, and then some things will be a conversation with the network. I'm part of a network, which is nice because you have like a whole team of people that are in the industry that you can bounce ideas off of. But when it comes to like the content or hiring someone to do something, that's mostly me.
Any thoughts on, like, that's a positive of being in a network, is having the team. Is it mostly a positive experience of being part of a podcast network? I don't know
Mhm.
a lot about it, and I'm just the I know, like, years ago, this is many years ago, before it was like a big industry. Um, the fear was that you wouldn't have control of your content.
Yeah, no, I have total
You
control.
have
They
total
don't,
control. It's yeah.
yeah, all they do is get sponsors
Hmm.
for the episodes and for the show. If I put on a live event in the fall, like they're going to help with all of that. Like they have laid out, like an expense sheet, like what it's going to cost, what the profits would be. Like they're very on the business
Mhm.
side of it, which is
Mhm.
great because I don't think that way. Like I suck at stuff like that. So
Yeah.
it's it's super helpful. And especially when I first started growing, I also it's like, what's my full-time job? Is my full-time job podcasting or is my full-time job social media? It's kind of
Right.
both. So when I was dealing with doing admin for social media partnerships and then also doing admin for the podcast, I
Yeah.
couldn't
Too much.
keep up with it. I still can't keep up with emails or anything. So having them take over a lot of the admin stuff, and that's why I'm with a social media management company as well, because
Mhm.
they just take over that stuff for you, which is so helpful.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, what should be taking up most of my time is podcasting and creating content and, answering DMs or comments.
Yeah.
So that's been super helpful.
I'm hearing you, and I imagine there are people out there, and I know that I've struggled with this a bit. It's the element of, like, feeling like you're giving up some aspect of control over what you're doing. That, at least in the way you're talking, seems like that was a relief for you. Like, come in, take over this, and like run. Um, are there aspects of what you do, or maybe with the networks and companies that you work with, that are more challenging, that feel like, "Ugh, this is hard for me to manage, this is hard for me to balance"?
Um, I don't think so. But honestly, if you talked to my podcast network or my social media manager, they would probably be like, Renee's the easiest person to work with because I'm so focused on other stuff.
Yeah, like, you want them to do their job, just do it. Yeah.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
they set me up with partnerships. They facilitate like all of this stuff. I have not had an issue at all. And that's me. Like that's
Yeah.
my personality. That's how I work. There have been people who have left networks, who have had terrible experiences, who have left changed social media management companies.
Mhm.
That, like, I'm lucky has not been my experience. Um, but I'm just like, put my head down, like do my work. And when they bring in partnerships and,
Yeah.
sponsors for the podcast, it's like, great. Like they help with stuff if I have questions. So yeah,
Yeah. It's
no
a
issues.
trust in the process, right? Like,
Yeah.
they do this full time, like, let them let them do it,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I think, um, certainly just a lot of creators, like, you are like a one-man show for such a long time. Um, and it's hard to know, because there isn't like a corporate ladder rule book. It's like, it's hard to
Mm-mm.
know when it's time to trust someone else, bring someone else in, and how is that gonna go? And it's a lot of times I find that incorporating help at first is actually a lot more work than it is to do it yourself. You have to, like, get over the
Yes.
hurdle of, okay, like, someone's coming in to help, but I have to, like, show them and teach them, and we have to get to know each other, and it's like a whole thing until you get over the hump.
100%. And this is why I've always struggled with hiring an assistant,
Mm,
because like my sister was working for me for a while, but she had a baby. And so she's not working for me anymore. But it was easy with her because I could just text her any time of day, like FaceTime her any time of day. Like it didn't matter. But even like early on, I hired an editor for the audio stuff, but I'm still responsible for making sure that he has all the audio files on time.
Yeah.
Okay. Then my network takes care of the YouTube stuff, but now I still have to make sure that they have the YouTube, like the video files on time. And then I hired someone for the podcast Instagram account. So he creates the reels and the TikToks for the podcast and publishes it on my platforms. But now I still have to make sure he has everything that he needs, like the captions, the everything.
Wow. Yeah.
From each episode ahead of time.
Yeah.
So this is why now I need to hire another person to basically do all of that stuff so that I'm not like sending files and uploading files and writing captions and you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But that's going to be difficult, more difficult than just hiring someone to edit something or, you know, that will be difficult. And that is scary.
Yeah.
Because that's not like I'm just hiring someone to do a service for me. That's like I'm hiring someone to basically take over what I'm currently doing.
Yeah. And they have to be your voice. They have to know your voice.
We have to have like a certain kind of relationship. And it's like a whole thing.
Yeah. And just hearing you talk, I remember my mom has a podcast and she's been doing it now, I think 7 years. And it got to the point where hearing her say that she was still doing some of the things that you're doing, it was like, I looked right at her and was like, stop, like hire someone. This is too much. Like you have much higher level things that you need to be setting your sights on and like business development and like vision. And, you know, like you start to have to become a CEO kind of thing. And I'm having that now with you where it's like, it surprises me actually that you haven't switched over yet. Like you know, I know you have the companies that are like managing and posting, but the captions take a long time. Captions are no joke. Like all those
captions, hashtags, like, which is why I don't put out as much content as I would like to, because my full-time job is organizing all of this stuff. I still like schedule my episodes. I still reach out to guests. I still like manage all of that stuff. And that's what I always say, like podcasting properly and doing all of that stuff with like the video and like doing like that is a full-time job. And then now at the same time, I'm putting social media on top of that as like a separate thing. So it's just, I need to hire someone.
Yeah. I was telling a friend the other day, you know, she's asking me about like rebrand and like how things are going and things in that. And I was just like, a single episode, it's like, if I really think about it, from pitch to like finding the person, to pitching them, to scheduling, to doing the interview, to all the post-production, like all of that, social media, it's like 8 to 10 hours an episode. Like it is a lot. It's a lot that people don't see. Like it's just like a lot.
Like writing the episode notes, like scheduling it to go out.
All of it. Sometimes just coming up with a title takes me like way longer than I would ever want to admit, because it's just like, is it SEO? Is it like, does it capture what I want it to capture? Is it too similar to the one I used last week? Like it's just like, oh my God.
It's all the background stuff that takes so much time. It's like these little tiny tasks that have to be done. And when you put everything together, it just takes so much time.
Yeah. Well, that was the other thing I was thinking just quickly. When you're doing it yourself, I can do it at midnight the night before if I have to. Whereas like you're saying, like if someone's going to do it for you, no, you got to be ahead. You got to be a week ahead. You got to be, you know, like getting them stuff so that they have time to do their job. And that's like a whole other layer. Yeah.
Now other people are relying on you to get stuff done at a certain time. I know.
Yeah. All right. So I want to switch gears a minute to more of like the forward facing aspect of what you do. And I know we've talked about this before on our our last episode, but it was many moons ago. Something that you do that a lot of creators don't do at all, actually, like, you know, really work to not do, is respond directly to the ignorant,
Oh,
hateful, sometimes insulting comments. You actually go as far as to sometimes make content out of it. Why? Why do that?
um, I don't know. Like, what does that say about me as a person? Like, I can't just like let things go, especially, well, sometimes comments are just ridiculous
Yeah.
and funny. And it's like you want to put someone in their place and be
Yeah.
like, what you're saying actually doesn't bother me. And it's so ridiculous that I will now make content out of it and
Mhm.
like showcase it for everyone to see. So it's like, if you want to come onto my page and write something ignorant or completely, I don't know, like ridiculous, I will show everybody.
Yeah.
Especially when it's a comment on a reel or a TikTok. It's like you put it out there in the public. And
Mhm.
so I will just amplify it a little bit for you. And then sometimes like that, oh my God, the TikTok and the reel where it's like the Home Alone house and I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, like Kevin and Spider-Man and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
That still gets the most ridiculous comments on it. As soon as I open up my Instagram, it's just like boom, 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 like comments still all over that video. And it's so
That was a while
unbelievable.
ago. That was a long time
Yes.
ago. Yeah.
So sometimes I will like screenshot all the comments and make a post out of it because I want people to know that those comments and that way of thinking is not okay. And
Yeah.
so when you post something like that, and then all of my followers and everyone kind of like gives backlash in the comments, it's like if somebody is living with someone that has that mentality or that view, it's like a little boost for them to know that
Mhm.
that is not okay. Like that's not right. Like giving them a little bit of support. And then same with, if I address things like sleep training or like formula feeding, whatever, it's like, let's put it out there. Like I want people to feel like they're supported because a lot of people probably do want to sleep train. They do, but they fear like judgment and from like their family members, their friends, whatever it might be, or maybe they're going through it now and people make these snide comments to them.
Mhm.
Well, I get those comments too. So I will put it out there and I will respond to that comment so that that person that's also experiencing that in their private life can be like, oh, yeah, cool. There you go. Like someone else like feels the same way as I do. And then it always helps when everyone in the comments is like, yeah, like, it's just like letting people know. It's just like addressing these negative things that sure on my page, it's out there in the public, but people deal with this stuff privately all the time in their life.
Yeah. Yeah. I I wonder for you, you know, you said it earlier and it comes across that way that when you are taking the time to publicly respond to a comment like that, it doesn't come across like it bothers you, like you don't lose sleep over it. It doesn't feel like you're internalizing it at all. Or have there been things in the past that either people have commented or DM'd or said to you in person based on your online presence that have gotten to you that really have like you've internalized or shook you to your core or anything like that?
Um, no. Okay, so here's the thing. When I get a respectful, thoughtful comment
Mhm.
about something that someone didn't like that I said, like the other day when I made the comment that I was heavily medicated to do a public speaking thing, I
Mm.
said it as like a joke, like I'm exaggerating, I'm being myself. Um, and I'm friends with these physicians. They've been on the podcast before and they messaged me and they were just like, hey, like you might not to be a buzzkill. Like their message was super nice. And it was just kind of like from a doctor's perspective, which I totally get once I read their comment.
Yeah.
they're like, you might not want to say something like that because I was driving home from the event. Like I was looking for my car and I was talking into my stories.
Mhm.
And they just nicely said, you know, like you might want to just like be careful how you're wording things because you don't want people to think like you're taking all these medications that make you calm and like maybe drowsy and then you're driving home. Like it's not a good look to do
Yeah.
that. And I was like, thank you so much for writing that, like for saying that to me, because a lot of people wouldn't say anything because they were afraid of how I would react, you know? But when it's like a respectful and a thoughtful comment, someone else years ago, this was during quarantine, wrote this really nice message about doing content that revolved around like, oh, mom's needing a break or like it's the end of the day and drinking alcohol.
Mhm.
Because I would make jokes about it. Everybody
Mhm.
was during
Right.
quarantine and it became like a thing.
Mhm.
And she wrote this really nice message. And from that day, like I've never
Mm.
done content like that again because
Mhm.
I completely agreed with what she was saying.
Yeah.
I've done episodes now on like mommy wine culture and how it's dangerous. And, you know, we're making jokes about drinking alcohol, which like to me, yeah, sure. I can look at content like that and think of it as a joke. I've never had an alcohol problem. I don't rely on alcohol as like a coping mechanism, but for other people, they do. And then when they see all their favorite creators
Right.
creating content like that, it like makes it okay and
Mhm.
almost like well, she does it and it's funny, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
So comments like that really do kind of stop me in my tracks and make me think, and I will act upon them and like address them online. Other than that, there's never been anything that was, you know, like a negative, like someone being mean to me that
Mhm.
has affected me. If it's like my mom, like one time I had Milo in the back seat and I like storied something and she messaged me and she was like, you shouldn't do that. You know, like Milo can hear what you're saying, even though you're talking into your phone. And it wasn't anything bad. It was just like, I was saying something about him,
Yeah.
but like to my phone. And she was like, you shouldn't do that in front of him. Like he can hear what you're saying. And I was like, great point. Like
Yeah.
you know, I really take those things into consideration. But yeah, my dad always said growing up, he's like, consider the source. So when these people write these things on my TikToks or my reels or in my DMs, like consider the source. Like,
Yeah.
where is this comment coming from? Is it someone that I respect and I love, like my mom?
Mhm.
Or is it some like Joe Blow, like
Right.
that just like came across my content and is trying to make himself feel better by putting me down, you know?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's kind of how I look at it. But never am I like, I have a whole Reddit thread. I don't know if you knew this, but this is like news
No.
to me. So my friend told me one day, she was like, you know, there's like a whole Reddit thread about
Stop.
you of people like that hate you. And I was like, really? I was like,
No.
am I famous? Like
Yes, that's what I was thinking. Like you've made it.
I've made it, like, oh my gosh. And so she's like, yeah, I didn't know if I should tell you or not. I was like, no, I'm so happy you told me.
Oh my God.
I don't have a Reddit account. Like, I don't even understand how to use Reddit. So I can't like keep up with it.
Yeah.
But I had my sister-in-law screenshot some funny ones and send it to me. And like, it's just so ridiculous. Like
Yeah.
the fact that people watch my content just so that then they can run to Reddit and like
I
say
know.
something so ridiculous as like, is anybody else like totally grossed out that she keeps calling Harry Styles her grandpa? Like this is so like disgusting. Like the most ridiculous things. And I'm just like, that is a sad life.
Yeah.
You know, it's like Gary V. I love Gary V. And he was always like, if somebody's saying something negative about you that doesn't even know you online, like you've already won the battle.
Yeah.
Like you've
No,
already
that's
won.
good. That's a
Yeah.
very good one to remember. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, just like don't get sucked in.
Yeah.
Like,
And
like how the whole first half of this is like us basically talking about how much more time in a day we would want to have or need. And it's like, I can't imagine dedicating brain cells and minutes to a thread about someone I don't even know. I wouldn't even dedicate time or energy to a thread about someone I know, let
I
alone someone
know.
I have never met before.
Like there's so many things that I wish I had time to do. Like I want to watch more TV. Like I want to cook meals. I want to like, oh my God, so many things.
Yeah.
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 But
Yeah. It's a whole thing out there on the internet.
the internet's fun.
Pockets and corners that people get into. Yeah. Has your content and what you've done online impacted your like real life relationships? Like, how does your husband feel about the stuff you talk about your marriage and him even? Or do you ask permission? Have you started? I'm also curious a little bit with your son. Like, have you started to think about, like, it was one thing when he was a baby, now he's getting older. Like, how do you sort of handle these in real life relationships and what you put out there online?
Yeah. The thing about Milo, like I think about that all the time. And I'm so torn, but I will be showing him like way less. Like
Yeah.
he's already like not really a part of stuff. If I make like a fun reel where it's like us like going to get the fish and stuff,
Tank,
like
yeah.
that's one thing, but he's not necessarily going to be part of content.
Mhm.
My husband loves it. He thinks it's hilarious. Like he will always like the negative comments that people leave, like it's almost like inside jokes in our house. And
That's good. That's funny.
yeah, like so he will like he brings up little things all the time. He thinks it's hilarious. Yeah, like other than that, like I wish I had more time for friends. Like being a creator is so weird because you're doing work all day, but at the same time I'm like, "Oh, I could go like have a coffee with Ariana or do something." I don't know. Like I feel like I'm so busy that like I don't text my friends from grad school like we used to text all the time. Like I can't even text people that are actually in my life.
I know.
But then I'm like doing stories on Instagram
Yep.
but that's also my job. So it's a weird thing to think about. Like I'm sitting here, I want to create content. I'm like setting up my studio downstairs. And because I'm my own boss and I can do whatever I want, it's like, why don't you go do a yoga class?
I know.
Like you need to like do things for yourself as well, which is why I'm excited that we started the book club because now literally every like 4, 5, 6 weeks, I get to meet up with friends. And it's like technically work related kind of, but it's at least it's like
double whammy. Yeah.
At least it's something that's social.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's hard. And like I spend lots of time with my family. Like we're probably going to go up to my mom's house tomorrow morning for like a week before school starts. So I do prioritize family stuff over like friends and even just like personal things like going to do yoga again or going for walks. But I need to do that. Like I want to be better at like I never make dinner. Like I would love to have a home cooked meal every day. But it's like, well, maybe once I have an assistant and they do all this stuff for me, like it will open up more time for me. But yeah, I wish I had more time to like make plans with friends and I don't know, even do stuff with my husband. Like it's hard with a kid this age though.
Yeah.
Cause like even last night, like my husband and I usually we would sit down and like watch a show together in the evening. Lately, Milo's been up. Like I thought his camp would tire him out, but he's turned into like a feral child. So he's been up till like, he's been up till like 9:30 every night. Like he goes to bed, he comes back downstairs. We're like, hi. He like goes upstairs, comes back down. I have to go pee. I have to go poo. Like,
Right.
like, oh my God. So last night he comes down. He's like, Mommy, I have to tell you something. I'm like, what? he's like, the white fish, I could see in his tummy that he ate food. I'm like, oh, that's great. Cause like we thought the white fish wasn't going to do well a few weeks ago, but like he's been fine. And he's
Right.
like, so the white fish is eating. I'm like,
And he
that's
needs
great.
to tell you at 9:15 at night.
Yeah. So it's like, now that we're in Guelph, like we want to get a babysitter that we can get so that my husband and I can go do stuff because we don't have family around here.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just sitting down and like rearranging your priorities and making time for stuff.
Yeah.
Because it's so easy to just put your head down and like work, and that's all you're focused on. But at the end of the day, like I do notice I don't feel the best when I'm not doing things for myself, like going to yoga and making time for friends and, making time for my husband. And yeah, so that's my goal. Like once school starts back up and I hire someone to kind of rearrange that kind of stuff.
Yeah. I was saying that the other day. I think it was to my mom. It was like when I was in corporate, I used to like daydream about working for myself so that I could like go get my nails done and like make food at home and, like all the things. And now I am home and do this and like I don't do any of those things.
Yeah.
It's almost like when you are told you can't, you daydream about being able to. And like the way that creators choose to go about that, right, is like making our own businesses, our own paths, our own way. And it's like the ideas are endless, the workflow is endless. And then when you add on top of it that you really are overlapping your personal and business in such a way that you don't do it in office. Like you said, you're making stories, that's work, but you're sharing what's going on in your life. It's a very blurry gray area. And I do think that as wonderful as creating like an online community is and all the benefits that come from it, at least for me, it also allows me to sort of in my head justify at times and put some sort of twisted rationale behind not even consciously, but like subconsciously pulling away from like in-person community. It's like, well, I have this one over here and it's right here on my phone and it's so easy and I don't have to drive anywhere and I don't have to schedule anything. And it's right here. If I want to like talk with someone, I can just voice message a fellow podcaster. And it's like, but we all know the difference between going back and forth for a few voice messages with another podcaster on Instagram DMs versus sitting down with a friend, whether it's someone who knows your industry or not. Like there are benefits to both, right? Like sitting down with a friend face to face, eyeballs to eyeballs, and like really making an hour or two out of it. Like it hits different. It's different.
No, I totally agree. Or like social media can be very exhausting too. It's like you were saying, it is nonstop. Like when my husband leaves work, he brings nothing
he turns
home.
Off. Yeah.
It's completely done. Like he comes home and has his own thoughts and doesn't have to worry about anything. And like that, I don't know what that feels like. And I haven't for probably over 10 years because, well, I've been in school my whole life. And grad school was the exact same feeling. It was like, it never ended. You could always be doing something. Like there was a paper you had to write. There was this like research. It was never ending. So if I was sitting down to watch TV, you feel this like guilt in the back of your mind because you're like, you could be doing something right now. I even feel guilty because I don't watch TikToks anymore.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's where I would get like inspiration, like, the trends that are going on. But no, I never watch TikTok anymore. So I don't know what's going on. And I'm like, Renee, you read your Kindle before bed for like 45 minutes. You should make time to watch TikTok. Like how ridiculous is that?
It's so funny. Like I'm the exact opposite. Like I'm scrolling TikTok and all I want to do is like cut that cord and read a book. Like it was like just cut me off from the source. Like, I don't want it. I had to delete it off my app, off my phone for a while because it was just, it's designed to keep you watching, right? So I
Yeah.
would, especially if like on the nights my husband works late, because like if he's goes to bed at the same time as me, it's like I have to fall asleep before him or I'll never fall asleep. But if he's not home, which is this is busy season for him now, so I'm like, what's Renee doing on TikTok? Like I
Yeah.
get like the hey, it's time for bed, and I'm like, you're right, right, it is.
That's so
Um,
funny.
I also wanted to ask you, and I think I've I think I'm gonna ask this in a an appropriate way. I'm curious what you think about it. There have been some, and maybe you haven't noticed this as much if you're not actively watching social media, um, but there do seem to be these mom content creator like groups. And I think when I say that, it comes off really negatively. And I think that there are some that feel very promotionally driven and some that feel just organic, that these women have connected and become a group of friends. This is not something that I've seen from the outside that you are a part of. Is that accurate? Like, or do you feel like you have a group of like content creator friends that you're a part of that you are in the mix with? Is that something you care about and think about at all?
Okay, I love this question.
Oh, good.
But
Because I was like nervous about it, but I'm like, I don't know. I feel like it's like a thing now. Everyone's like part of a group.
I don't know the groups.
Oh, good.
But
See?
maybe this is because I don't
Yeah. You know, it's
I don't
scrolling.
consume content.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm super lucky being a podcaster. Like I connect with so many people and I
Mhm.
have a group of people that I talk to regularly. Um like Ariana has become like a really good friend. She lives near me now, which is great.
Mhm.
Um this family tree, Alex, like the girls that are in my book club,
Okay.
like that. Yeah, it's interesting, but do you mean like they make content together and stuff?
Um, yeah, like there are I know there like occasionally you will see like they almost do like a retreat. It's like, and
Oh.
there's been a couple of them. It's not like I'm not like talking about one specific group. It's like I know of like one group that's like they are kind of like I'm like trying to talk about it without like sounding like awful and just like I'm judging because I'm really not. I'm not like I want to be in a group, you know. But like they actually all started their platforms like years ago. Like they were like more like OG like Instagram creators, and they've really connected and they've bonded and they're very friendly offline. That occasionally when they get together as a group, they create content that goes online. And then there's like
Oh.
another group that I've seen more on TikTok that is seems more like, hey, they met now and like decided to like do a thing together. Like, I don't know. And then you have like the whole like Utah mom thing. Like, that's like a whole other thing, which feels like totally icky. Like, I don't like watching them. And that I don't care about saying because I feel
Yeah,
strongly
I
about
don't
that. But like, I don't know. It seems like I find it interesting just to collect my thoughts here. I find it interesting to see who ends up in the content and being like, "Oh, like they're friends," or like, "Oh, they're friends." And then sometimes you see some overlap and it's just like a curious thing because you watch all of these women individually and then they come together, and I just as a person who's, you know, followed you for a long time, it was like you weren't popping up in any of them and I'm like, "Oh, that's interesting." Like I just noticed it is all.
yeah, I don't know. But this is so
Comfortable?
interesting to me. But like honestly, I would say like when you said like groups, I was like, "Oh, like I have a lot of friends that are creators,
Okay.
but like we're not going on trips together and creating content. We
Okay.
literally like go for dinner and don't post anything."
Okay. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like
Yes.
um
And
it's
I
more
think a
like
lot of that is happening too. Like even within these groups I'm talking about, I think there's a lot of that happening and that it's just like the occasional, hey, there's actually more than two or three of us together. There's actually like eight of us together and we're going to like, you know, do this. And but I also think it's interesting what you said about having the podcast too as like another like source of content like for you, because most of the people that I'm talking about like probably really only have, no, it sounds
Yeah.
terrible, but like their main thing is
Is
TikTok.
creating content.
Right. So like it makes sense. Like you have all these women with hundreds of thousands of people together. It's like, yeah, let's all put our stuff out there. But and you said
Yeah.
that last time that like your like if you could just podcast all day, like you really enjoy that and love that. And so I think it's different if you have two avenues.
Yeah. Like
I'm
that's,
probably
I
gonna have
had
to
to,
edit some of my babble out.
no, it makes sense. It makes sense. And you know what? A lot of the trips where there's like a big group of people, I wouldn't be surprised if they were sponsored trips.
Yeah.
And somebody else is selecting who is going.
Yes.
100%.
Yes.
Yeah. And I like, there's a lot of like, nobody is gonna pop up on social media and be like, oh, I actually don't connect with this person or like enjoy their content or
Mm.
whatever. But if they're in a room together, they are going to smile and be like, yeah, besties, and
Right.
put it up on their stories and tag the other person.
Yeah.
I don't really do stuff like that. And like I said, like if I'm going with friends to something, like I'm very select, and I've had this my whole life. Like I've never been able to be fake with people. Like I am not going to change who I am just like in hopes that you're going to like me.
Mm-hmm.
I've never been able to do that. And I've seen so many of my friends like be so good at that and being so like lovely and,
Mm-hmm.
not that I'm not nice and welcoming and outgoing
Polite.
and stuff. Yeah, but if I don't connect with someone, I don't care who you are and how many followers you are, like I'm not going to try to maintain a relationship with you or pretend like we're best friends.
Yeah.
Which I think that happens a lot on
Yeah.
social media. And so it's very easy for us to look at other people tagging each other and being like, oh my God, everybody has best friends but me. And like, look at, they have this big, like amazing group of friends. And like, I just have like a couple friends and we don't do fun stuff like that. And it's so fabricated and like, it's not real life.
Yeah.
Like it's not.
Yeah. And I think what feels like a decade ago when I asked this question, the ones that I said like feel more promo-y are the ones that feel like I follow you both, and there's not a lot of chance that you have a lot in common. Like there's not a lot of chance that this is real. And so those definitely feel more forced. There are some that I just know of from knowing a couple of individuals within them where it feels authentic. It feels organic and like they're leaning on each other, And I think that that's, at least for me, when I think about, if there were to be like a group of like fellow creators or something, that is what I would want out of it, is like people that get it, right? Because like my whole show right now is transitioning to, this whole space, like the behind the scenes of creators. And unless you've put yourself out there, you don't quite know exactly what I'm going through. And so it's like, it's just super validating. And like at times, just like that warm blanket that you need of someone looking at you and going, I get it. I know what you're
Mhm.
talking about. And what you're going through is valid, because I think not only do a lot of people who aren't creators, like, not only do they not know, but like there's still this, I still think there's this stigma out there about like creators like not having a real job. Like I think it's
Mhm.
still seen as, oh, lucky you get to just like make all these fun videos all day. Like, isn't it fun? Don't you have fun? Isn't it just like the
Mhm.
best? And it's like, no, there's like real stuff. Like there's, not only is it a real job, but there's no rule book. There's no one way to do it. And because your business is your face, there is a lot of pressure, I think, to say and do the right things? Are you responding to every social injustice? Are you responding in a way that people want you to respond? Like, oh my
Yeah.
God, like the dance. It's like the dance of
See, and I don't like, which is probably why I don't grow as much as other people. Like I can't, that's what I was saying. Like I can't be fake and put out content just to be performative and be
yeah,
like, everyone else is talking about this, so I'm going to talk about it now.
yeah,
I can't do it. It's like,
yeah,
and if people don't like that, that's fine. But I mean, I'm not going to get upset at CNN for not following the Jonas Brothers tour because that's not their job and that's not their area of interest. And people assume that if you're not talking about it on your platform on social
yes,
media, then you don't care about it
right,
and you don't even know what's going on. It's like, no, like my platform, like I'm only sharing what I want to share and what, like, yeah,
you're staying in,
that's
you're
the
just in
worst
your
part.
lane. Yeah,
Yeah, like I am going to share about us going to get a fish tank, but no, I'm not going to spend so much energy and time talking about other topics that
right,
are like in the news or, like disasters going on or because that's not what my platform is for. Like I'll
right,
acknowledge it. Doesn't mean that I don't know what's going on and that I'm not talking to my husband about it
right,
or
right.
like people that are actually in my life, like in real life.
Right.
But yeah, that's the worst. And like you were saying, it's more personal because if you don't do well, if you put something out, it doesn't do well, whatever it may be, it's like you take it as a reflection on you, as opposed to like if I made soaps for a living and people weren't buying my soaps, it's like, oh, it's the soaps.
Right.
I'll like
Right.
try and fix that up. But
Right.
as a creator, especially someone like me that it's just like kind of my life and my interests and stuff, you can take it personally and be like, oh, it's me.
Right.
It's not the product that I'm
Right. You are
creating.
the product.
Yes, but you have to kind of like, I'm really good at like separating the two things. Like there's my real life, there's content that I put out and I don't take it personally. Like sometimes I'll put up a TikTok and it gets like no views and I'm like, "Oh, okay." Like
Yeah.
moving on. Like
Yeah.
in a week I'll put one up that gets 10 million views. Like
Yeah.
it's yeah, I try to just not think about it much and then at the end of the day, I'm already doing exactly what I want to be doing.
Mm.
So instead of worrying about like growing and likes and this and that, and I'm like, I'm already doing what I want to do.
Yeah.
Like, what if I had 1 million followers on Instagram? I'd still be doing this.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same thing.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I always try and remember that. Like, you're already doing what you want to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I really like that. That's really, it hits. It hits.
Yeah.
Um, I want to ask you just to kind of wrap up because I feel like that's a really great kind of sentiment to leave on. Any advice for someone listening, a creator listening who's just starting out and I guess I don't know, I guess it's hard to this is something I struggle with, and so maybe I'll ask it this way. Not wanting to like overly focus on the likes and the growth and knowing that the like relying too heavily on that focus more likely than not will hinder your growth instead of just like authentically being yourself. At the same time, knowing that kind of the point of creating content and putting it out there is for people to see. And if you want to monetize and actually be a business with this, you need some level of visibility and whatnot. Like, what is your advice for someone starting out that doesn't have the following yet, knows it's important, but also we don't want to like heavily rely on it? Like, I don't know. I'm really asking you to talk to me now is what I'm saying is like, I want to like be in this like authentic space. but this isn't a hobby.
Yeah.
You know, like I want it to be something. And so far it just has really been a hobby. And so it's hard for me to understand how to like cross it over and like marry the two things. Do you know what I'm saying?
I feel like you have to like what you're doing. Like you
Yeah.
have to enjoy the content that you're creating. Otherwise, it's not going to last. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not going to, that's what I was saying. Like, if I niche down and just focused on those topics that I know crush,
Yeah.
I would have like 700,000 followers on Instagram, but I don't want to do that. Like, it doesn't make me happy. So it's like, I like going back and watching the fish tank reel because I'm like, haha, like this is so great. Like, I love it. And even though it doesn't crush like something else would,
Right.
I enjoy that. Like, I
Yeah.
enjoy putting that out into the world.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing. Like, you have to, it has to be something that you like
Mhm.
and not like this calculated, like, oh, like what does well? Like, okay, I'm going to stick to that. And,
Mm.
you know, like it has to be something that you enjoy because it's going to come across in the
Mhm.
content if you're not fully into it.
Mhm.
And then I think just not overthinking. Like, I have an issue right now with overthinking stuff. Because I don't have as much time to put out content, whereas
Mhm.
before it was just like in the moment, I'm like creating content all the time and just like pressing post.
Right.
Now I have to be more like thinking about it
Intentional.
because I don't have time
Right.
to do it. So I'm trying not to overthink, because I think that gets you into trouble. You're like overthinking
That's what I'm doing right now.
and
Yeah.
then you don't put anything out because you're like, "Ugh, like
Yeah.
it's not gonna do well." Or if you put something out and it doesn't do well, then you're like, oh, okay, that's it. Like, I'm not gonna do anymore. And honestly, like I don't know if it was quarantine or what, but as soon as I was just like, I don't even care. Like, I don't care what I look like, what I'm wearing, like
Yeah.
I'm not going to go back and like look at my facial expressions and like see, you know what I mean? Like
Right.
as soon as that happened, like I started growing because I was just showing up as myself.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then just being consistent. I
Yeah.
feel like, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. You. I'm like that's totally where I'm at. Like I'm just at the time of this recording, like I haven't launched the like rebrand yet, so I feel like there is a lot of appropriate overthinking happening in the sense that I'm going to be doing something new. Like I want to like refresh and revamp and you know, whatever. But like I feel a little bit like it's been so long now that I've not really had a personal presence on my platforms that it feels like I need to like rip off this huge, awful, uncomfortable band-aid of just like stop worrying about what person you went to middle school with is going to be thinking when you
Yeah.
post this because like like it's hard like when you have for me I don't have like that big of a following and so I know most of the people following are people that know me so it's like oh it feels like a little cringy.
Do you have a
Ah,
TikTok account?
I do. I do. I used to like a year ago, a year and a half ago, I was like really having fun with it and making videos and on trend and like was just having fun. And then I went through a season where it wasn't happening and nothing was happening. It wasn't a specific TikTok thing. It was just like I don't have the headspace for this. And then I started using it more for podcast clips. No, those don't work there.
Yeah.
At least in the format that I'm doing them, where I'm just like taking the
No,
interview and like
yeah.
putting it there. It's like, not really what people want to see on there, a little bit better on Reels or the shorts on YouTube and stuff. But yeah, I reached out to Kira Jones. She's like she helps people with TikTok and stuff. And I was like, I just think maybe a call with you to like help me wrap my brain around how I can like promote a podcast without directly promoting a podcast would be helpful because at least
I
right
know.
now, that is my goal. Like I want to turn eyeballs to the show. It's like, I don't know. I could see getting into it. Like you're saying, like just showing more of me and what's going on because I used to do that before lockdown and before I got all twisty in the head.
Mm-hmm.
When there was no pressure, I was a lot better at doing that. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's really what it is. I just work through my whole therapy session right there in a minute and a half.
No, that's exactly it. When you feel pressured to create content, to put stuff out, then all of a sudden it's like I was
Yeah.
saying, it's not fun anymore.
Yeah, that's how I feel about it right now. It's like I should do this, I should do that, I should.
Yeah.
And we know that the shoulds are just not where you want to be.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Anyway, Renee, is there anything lingering on your mind? Anything you wish I would have asked you about you or your platforms? Anything you want to leave people with before I let you go here?
I don't think so. I mean, look out. My goal is to start this second podcast, and it's going to be daily, Monday to Friday.
Ooh, go girl.
I don't know how it's going to happen, but this is my ADHD goal. So yeah, I'm going to try and start it October 2nd. So
Do you have a name
look out
for
for
it
that.
yet?
I don't, but the theme of it is that there's no niche.
Love it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just whatever's going on that day. And then
It's
I'll do
the
interviews here and there. And
Okay.
yeah, it's just going to be random.
inner workings of Renee's brain
Yeah.
for public consumption.
Exactly.
Oh, I love it. All right. Well, Renee, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time and your insight. It's really valuable to me. And so I just thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, did you hear it? Did you hear it at the end there where it all clicked for me? When there was no pressure to post, I felt a lot more confident showing up as myself online. But as the pressure built, I started caring about what others thought. I cared more about what I was doing, and it took away some of the enjoyment and some of the authenticity, some of the natural authenticity. And Renee said it so succinctly. When you feel pressured to create content and put stuff out, then all of a sudden it's not fun anymore. Which is exactly why she is shaking stuff up and starting a new podcast. She wants there to be a place for her niche mom content, but she also wants to have an outlet for everything else. I totally see how she's blended her professional and personal content and has made a genuine and relatable brand, but I truly applaud her for recognizing what she believes will work better for her. And really, she kind of did this from the beginning when she made separate accounts. But you don't only have to post on one topic. You can, like Renee, you can separate those niche posts, those accounts. You can do what works for you because I've said 100 times, there's no rule book in this industry. As content creators, we're all out here experimenting and try it. What's going to feel good for you? Try it out. Do you want to post about a bunch of different things? Do you want to separate it out? Do you want different accounts? Try it. See what works. See what feels good for you. I want to move on to delegating and help. So Renee talks about how podcasting and social media content each feel like a full-time job. And while she is still very much doing the detailed work that goes into both, she does have a podcast network. She does have someone helping with her social media, and having people to help her with the admin side of things is a huge relief. On the flip side, we know this is scary. We know it takes time to teach someone else what we do and trust that they're going to do it the way we want it done. But if we don't, one of the possible outcomes is burnout. And I've talked with several others about burnout on the show before. And if this is something you're feeling, something you're struggling with, I'm going to suggest a couple of episodes that really dive deep into this. Episode 69 with Marissa Lonick, we discuss time management, and episode 180 with Jude Charles, we dig into embracing wellness to overcome burnout. Both of those are linked in the show notes. But I really just marvel at Renee's platforms and how much she's able to get done. And I appreciate her candidness on sharing how much she still does herself and where she has help. Because I think that's so important. I think we often see big social media accounts and think, how is this one person doing this? And the truth is, a lot of times, even if it's one person, there is someone else helping them out. And so I really appreciate her sharing that, just that transparency. One of the other things I really love about Renee and her platforms is her confidence. She can just shrug off negative comments like they never happen. And even better, sometimes she turns those negative comments into more content. And I just love her explanation for this. Sometimes who doesn't love just putting someone in their place? But what I thought was really smart is that she does this to publicly support others who might feel those kinds of negative comments in their real life, right? So if someone comments something super negative or judgy and Renee can let it roll, she knows that there might be someone in her community that sees that comment and takes it to heart. And so in calling it out, she's really dismissing it and saying no. And I just love that. And so she also relates it back to something she learned from Gary Vee. If you just recently listened to episode 183 with Claire Jefford, she also shared some great insights from Gary Vee. It's linked in the show notes. But for Renee, she remembers Gary Vee saying that if someone who doesn't even know you is saying something negative about you online, then you've already won. And it's just so, so true. I do also love that she takes a moment to point out that not all criticism and feedback is hurtful or wrong, and that it's all about the delivery, right? And lastly, I just want to emphasize her points about taking care of herself and prioritizing herself and really looking at that, scheduling it in her calendar, hiring help, whatever we need to do to make it happen. Do it. I hope she's able to make some more time for yoga in the future. I know how busy she is and we all are, but I cannot say enough how important it is to take time for yourself. Renee, I can't thank you enough for making the time for this conversation. You are a gem of a creator, a just all-around solid human being. I appreciate you so much. Thank you for listening. I hope you got as much out of this conversation with Renee as I did, and I'll catch you next time. Bye. Thanks so much for listening. This podcast is a production of Luann Nigara, Inc. To learn more about me, my world, all the things going on, head over to ChristieRocha.com. Bye.